But let's get to our guest today. She is a sporting icon. She became an Olympic medalist in the 1984 and 1988 Olympic Games. To the millions watching her javelin throwing achievements at the time, Fatima Whitbread was the epitome of a strong, powerful woman. But even at the height of that success, Fatima always carried the weight of her difficult childhood, which included being abandoned by her mother when she was a tiny baby. Now she's fighting on behalf of children in care homes across the country. So here to tell us all about that, please welcome Fatima Whitbread.
Hi, girls. Hello, thank you. Hi,
Lovely to see you.
How are you doing?
Good to see you.
And you?
I have to say, Fatima, I had absolutely no idea about your childhood. So it's going to be fascinating talking to you. And the reason that you are talking about it to us is that you've teamed up with the charity Action for Children. So this is something very, very close to your heart. So before we talk about what you're doing with Action for Children and moving forward and how you're trying to help kids now, just tell us about what happened to you, because you were abandoned as a baby.
I was abandoned as a baby. Well, firstly, I'd like to say National Childcare Day is coming up, and we have, some 10,000 children in the care system at the moment, and National Care Day is about foster care helpers, and we currently have the best we've ever had at the moment, but we still need a lot more.
A number of foster carers.
A number of foster carers, yes, and every child has a right to a safe and happy childhood. So this is why I've teamed up with Action for Children, because they do a wonderful job. I mean, we saw at Christmas time with John Lewis, they teamed up to help young people, young vulnerable people. So they have at least 40,000 or more that they've helped to provide practical and emotional care.
Yeah, you're saying every child needs a safe and happy environment, but you didn't have that for many years. So tell people what happened to you when you were a child.
OK, well, when I was a child, I was abandoned as a baby, and some would say left to die. A neighbour heard a baby crying and didn't see anyone coming to the flat for a couple of days. So she called the police, and they banged the door down and rescued the baby. And I spent the next 6 months in hospital with malnutrition and nappy rash.
So you were this close to death?
I was really very close. Another day, half a day, I think that would have been it. So I was made a ward of court and then sent to a children's home in Hertfordshire.
As a baby?
As a baby, for 25 other children there. I spent the first 5 years of my life there, and how can I put it? It's really tough, because I understand the importance of love and care for these young people. For me, I had a tremendous amount of trauma and neglect in my life. I also suffered emotional and mental and sexual abuse in that period of time. And for the first 5 years...
In the care home itself?
Well, in life generally, because I was also made to go back to the biological family, and I was abused by the mother's lover, sexually raped. But the first 5 years were quite traumatic because, as you can imagine, all the young children, I mean, they're just emotionally, distraught. And every time someone would come to the front window, I would look outside in the car park area, and I'd say, is that my mummy coming to get me? And a lot of the children also felt this, there's a tremendous loss, sense of neglect, and vulnerability, which these young children have.
I think I read you said, we were well looked after, catered for, but not
emotionally
loved and loving.
Yeah. I mean, this is my point about every child needs, has the right for a safe and happy childhood.
What was your route out? How did you end up with someone that you could eventually call mum?
Yes, I was very fortunate. Firstly, let me tell you, at the age of 5, I was told by the house matron, Fatima, she said, come down at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning and sit in the foyer because your biological mum's coming with the social worker to take you to see your half-brother and sister and live in another children's home. Well, nobody ever told me that I had a half-brother and sister. I never had any visits or Christmas cards or birthday cards. I did not know I had a family. So it was quite a shock. I mean, that children's home was my family and the children that lived there. And But to fast track you a bit forward, because I know we have only a small amount of time, and it's really important for me to get the message out there for our young people. Sport was my saviour, and for a lot of young children, they need to have some focus. They need to feel good about themselves. They need to be able to connect with somebody. And Action for Children allow that to happen. They let these children's voice be heard. They campaign and help, you know, to make lasting improvements in these young children's lives. And that's so important, I think, today, that these children have connection with somebody.
I believe the woman who taught you javelin, she's the first person who ever bought you a present, wasn't she?
Well, fast tracking, I was at senior school and I was approaching 11, and I was always being told you'll amount to nothing. You'll end up in the board schools at 16, because kids in childcare, they get moved out of their homes at 16, which is another thing we need to get far too young. And my son's 24, and I can't get rid of him. So yeah, I mean, it really is important. I mean, for me, I was always worried about prostituting, marijuana and living on the streets, because back then in the 70s, that's what it was like. And
were you a bit bolshy because of all this, do you think?
I was a lovable rogue. I mean, it's tough living in children's homes. They're far different to what they are now. Back then, they're more institutions, and they don't cater for your needs emotionally. And I was a fighter. I used to look after the other children, and there was Auntie Pete, who was one of the house aunties there. She was a Cockney lady, and I remember watching her, hear her clip-clopping down the road, and I looked to see where she lived. And I went out and picked all these daffodils, and I walked to her house and knocked on the door, and I pulled these daffodils out. I said, will you be my mummy? Oh. But what she taught me, and this is really key, she taught me, she said, Fats, come around. She said, have a cup of tea and a biscuit. She said, now listen, I can't be your mummy because I've got to be mummy to all those children. She said, but I can't always be there. She said, so when I'm not there, she said, you can be there, mummy. She said, you can look after them. She said, in giving, you will receive. And I learned an awful lot from that. So I used to defend and look after those children like they were my own. But sport really was my saviour. And it was through sport that I found my adoptive foster care mother, Margaret.
Yeah, Margaret, and she actually said to you, you know, you can call me Mum, you know.
She did. It took a while. I mean, like anything. I mean, this is how it happened. I was playing netball with my school team, and I was very vocal because I wanted my team to win, and it was a tight match for the league final. Of course, following her telling me off a couple of times, the whistle went. The umpire said, "You'll be off," and I said, "Oh, come on!" And so her school team said, the captain said, "Hold on. She'll send you off." So after the end of the match, my friend who lived in the children's home around the corner, we both decided to go to the local athletic club and try some track and field athletics. And she went off to the sprinters. I saw a tall blonde guy throwing a spear, so off I went there. And he said, "No, you can't throw that, you've got to wait for the coach." So Jack Grinney, the shot put coach, said, "Go and sit in the stand. The javelin coach will be over soon." So I'm sitting there toe tapping, and all of a sudden this Minnie pulled in, and Jack said, here's the coach. And as she walked across, it's that same woman on the net. Oh my God. And when she came across, Jack introduced her, and she said, "I know who you are, young lady." She said, "Any of that cheek on the netball court, you won't be throwing a javelin here." Oh,
listen, Fatima, we could talk to you all day. I'm so sorry, because I do have to go to a break. But that wonderful woman became your foster mother and loved you and helped you. And I know that with Action for Children, that's exactly what you want to do for other children and encouraging other people to become foster carers.
Just definitely want those people that are thinking about foster care, please go on www.actionforchildren.org.uk.
Thank you. And we'll put that website on our page as well. If you've been affected by anything that we've been discussing there with Fatima, there are lots of helplines as well available on our website. Thank you very much again.